everybody, it's Katie here, and it's that time of the week again. It's time to talk about Shadowhunters. So episode 3, What Lies Beneath. There was a lot going on in this episode, that's for sure. A couple of good plot twists that I wasn't expecting. I want to start by talking about Raphael because we got a bit more of a clue as to what he's doing. And first of all, the start of the episode, that scene with him and Rosa. You didn't have to make me cry within the first 5 minutes. That just really wasn't necessary. That scene was so adorable, but like, also the worst. Him telling her to look at the stars. I didn't need that. I just didn't. So that was this lovely, beautiful scene that we had between Raphael and his younger sister, who is now much older. And then later on in the episode, he gets a phone call from the nursing home. Rosa, no! Rosa sadly passes away in this episode. Poor Raphael. I have such conflicted emotions over him because like there are some things that I want to strangle him for, but then also I just want to give him a hug because he needs one. And talking of hugs, Izzy did come over to comfort him. I really love the scene between them. I loved how Izzy wanted to be there. No matter what has gone on between them in the past, she was going to be there for him. She didn't want him to go through this on his own. Because I'm pretty sure, other than Magnus, she is the only other person who knows about Rosa. I can't remember if anybody else found out. So I was really happy that she turned up to see him, and also that she offered to go to the funeral, because obviously Raphael can't go outside in the daylight. Whilst we're on the subject of Raphael wanting to walk in the daylight, the girl that he has in his basement is Heidi. I had to Google Heidi after the episode because I had an inkling as to who she was, but I'd completely forgotten her as well. My memory is literally the worst. This is why I should do rewatches, because I forget everything. But Heidi is the girl that Simon thought he'd killed last season, but it turned out there was a vampire called Quinn who was actually feeding on her. So yeah, it turns out she's the one that Raphael has chained up in the basement. She is a vampire now. She wants to meet her sire. She's not very happy that Raphael has her locked up. He keeps sedating her to further ignore the problem, but it's not working because she does escape at the end of this episode. But one of the things that I found interesting was when she was talking to Raphael about how he was keeping her there, she mentioned him setting her on fire. So I'm assuming he is experimenting on her, exposing her to the sun in the hopes of recreating the daylighter abilities that Simon has. And if that is what he's doing, it is sick. So that's where my conflicted emotions come from, because on one hand I really do feel sorry for him, and then on the other he's being a complete dickhead and testing on innocent people vampires. So yeah, Raphael really did have me torn in this episode. I really did appreciate these scenes with Raphael though, because I think David plays the character really well. He always gets his emotions across brilliantly, so I was definitely enjoying having more Raphael in this episode. Okay, so moving away from Raphael, let's talk about Clary, Jace and Izzy. Jace is still having nightmares, and now he believes that Jonathan is the demon that they've been seeing possessing people. They've now named this demon the Owl because it looks quite like an owl. At least I think that's why they've called it the Owl. Jace is convinced that it's Jonathan and that's why he's having these nightmares. He opens up to Clary and tells her that that's who he thinks it is. Even though Clary believes that Jonathan is dead, Jace ends up planting these doubts in her mind. Jace also tells Clary not to tell anyone else, just in case there are spies in the Institute again, but Clary's not having any of that shit. She goes straight to Izzy. Izzy is supposed to be going to this important meal with her mother, but she drops these plans to go off with Jace and Clary. The start of the episode, there was a girl who was attacked by the owl but managed to get away. They go and track her down at this charity event she's doing, I think, so that they can keep an eye on her in case the owl comes back. So Jace is convinced that he's seeing Jonathan everywhere. Then when he thinks he's found him, they have this little standoff in a room filled with mirrors. There were so many Jaces and Sebastians in this room because of those mirrors. Can we talk about Sebastian saying all of Jace's last names? I mean, he has a point, it is hard to keep up. Who is Jace? Which name does he belong to? What are you supposed to tag him as on Tumblr? Because to hell if I know. So yeah, that was the only relatable thing that Sebastian's ever said. Of course, it's not actually Sebastian, it's all in Jace's mind. Clary and Izzy lose track of Morgan and they find her outside being possessed by this demon. They know it's not Jonathan/Sebastian because Izzy's whip had no effect on it, so they still have no idea who the owl actually is. We find out at the very end of the episode, it's actually Jace! I do remember in the book that he was vulnerable to things like this because when he was brought back to life by the angel, all of his protection that he had been wiped clean. So I am assuming that that's following the book. He's not protected against possessions and stuff anymore, so that is how Lilith is able to control him. I am excited to see where this plot goes. I mean, I feel terrible for Jace because when he finds out about the things that he's done, he's going to absolutely hate himself. So yeah, I feel bad for him, but I think it's a fantastic storyline and I am excited for the future of it. Moving on from that, let's talk about Malik. Malik in this episode, again, we were so well treated. They are just the purest thing about this show. Honestly, that's not even me being biased. That's just me being rational. They are just fantastic. In this episode, we find out that Mayrus is coming over for dinner. She originally wanted Alec, Izzy, and Jace, but then Jace backs out, and then Izzy backs out to help Jace. And so we are left with Alec and his boyfriend. Alec cooking the stew? Oh, bless him. I mean, he tried. He told that whole cute little story about how this stew really cheered up his mum when he fed some to Magnus. I just knew that Magnus was going to find it disgusting. And he did! Bless him for using his magic to try and help Alec out, but of course it comes back to bite him during dinner. This scene was just so domestic and adorable and everything that we needed it to be. And then the dinner itself, Mayrus showing up like, my boys! Why is that me? That's such a big mood. I am Mayrus in this situation. So this scene at dinner is going really well at first because Magnus and Mayrus are getting along great. And then of course there's a tiny teensy little bit of tension when the stew is brought up. But then we get to the real focus of what this dinner was supposed to be about in the first place. Mayrus tells Alec that she has been reinvestigated because she is a former Circle member and that they have come to the decision that she should have her runes stripped and she's going to be banished from Alicante. Also wasn't expecting that one. This talk between Mayrus and Alec, I just loved everything about this scene. The character development that we've seen in Mayrus in this show is just so fantastic because honestly, book Mayrus just didn't appeal to me at all. Even though she does change and she becomes a better person by the end of all of the books, I just never really connected with her character. Whereas in the show, just the way she's been developed, I've just enjoyed watching that so much more than I did when I was reading her development, if that makes sense. I swear I never make sense half of the time. Her talk with Alec really showed how much she's changed from the start of the show. The way she owns up and admits to the things that she did wrong and how she's upset, but she did do these things that could cause the Clave to make that decision in the first place. And you can tell how much she just cares about the welfare of her children more than she cares about anything else. They are more important to her than runes will ever be. When Alex says that he's going to fight for her, she doesn't want him to, because she doesn't want him to have to give up the Institute. I just think it showed so much great development in her character. And also when she was saying goodbye to Magnus and Alec at the end of the night, what she said to Magnus, oh my god. Her admitting that her prejudices were wrong and that Magnus is actually the right person for Alec. When she said, thank you for loving my boy. How many times does this episode want to make me cry? So yeah, that by far was my favourite scene in this episode. I just really love Mayrus as a character in this show, and her acceptance of Alec and Magnus, and yeah, just yes. So the last few things that I want to talk about. Poor Simon. As always, he's having a really hard time. He's still confused over the mark on his head. The werewolves still don't want him around. That dickhead werewolf from last week actually had a talk with Luke about it, and it's putting poor Luke in such a horrible position. So Simon ends up going to see Raphael in this episode to see if he can tell him anything. Bless Simon for starting that conversation with, it's a beautiful night. Simon, you are here to get answers, not to flirt with Raphael. Of course, this scene ends in disaster because Raphael is having a really bad day. He ends up trying to attack Simon and of course ends up feeling the effects of the mark. Simon then ends up trying to go to the Sealy court, but he doesn't get in. He just ends up jumping in the river. Can we talk about how much of a beautifully supportive girlfriend Maya is? She can just do no wrong. She is perfect. I love how much she is being there for Simon right now, because at the moment we're not really getting to see him interact with too many other characters. He basically just has Maya at the moment. I really love their relationship in the show. It's quite concerning how much the show has made me like their relationship. Luke's presence in this episode was mostly tied to Simon as well. Ollie tells him that she's told her girlfriend about the shadow world, and Luke assumes that she's not taking it as seriously as she should be. So when they're sitting in the car together outside the club that the others go to, he ends up talking to her about Simon. Simon is proof of how dangerous it is for mundanes to get involved in the shadow world. Whilst Luke was talking about Simon to Ollie, you could tell how much he cares about Simon. And then we had this scene at the end of the episode where Simon comes home and Luke's there, and Luke doesn't even have to say anything, but Simon knows that he needs to leave because Luke is so torn between Simon and his pack. He has a responsibility to his pack. He has to put them first. But we know that Simon is like a son to Luke, so it's so difficult, and I hate seeing them in this situation, and I feel sorry for both of them so much, and I don't like it. Poor Luke and poor Simon, they don't deserve this. It's making me very unhappy with the werewolves right now, because Luke just wants to keep Simon safe. So yeah, that's not a nice situation. I am pretty sure this means we're going to be meeting Jordan in the show very soon, because I am assuming this is how Simon ends up living with him. In the book, they end up sharing a flat together. And also Jace ends up living with them at some point, so I really hope that the show does that as well, because some of those scenes were brilliant. So yeah, I am expecting Jordan to make his appearance soon. Whilst I'm talking about Simon, I don't know how I feel about the Mark of Cain not being down to Clary. I'm interested to see where this goes, but I still wanted Clary to have created it. I'm not sure how they're going to explain the Sealy Queen being able to put the mark on Simon. Maybe it's not the Mark of Cain, it's the mark of something else, and it just has the same effect as the Mark of Cain did in the books. I don't know. I guess all we can do is wait and see. I am sure we will get an explanation at some point, and I'm looking forward to it. Right now I feel like Simon's quite isolated away from the other characters, so I can't wait to see him interact with everyone again. As much as I am enjoying his and Maya's little adventures, I want them all back together properly. Also, I'm in serious need of more Izzy. Dr. Sexy showed up again in this episode, wanting Izzy's number. Still don't know if I completely trust him. Maybe I am just wary of anyone hurting Isabel. But yeah, I don't know enough about him to fully trust him just yet. So we will see where that goes. So that's about all I can think of to say in regards to this episode. As always, if there is anything I've forgotten to mention, then feel free to discuss it down in the comments. I am looking forward to seeing more of Jace as the owl in next week's episode. Please let me know all of your thoughts on this week's episode. What did you like? Was there anything you didn't like? Let me know. I will be back here next week with another discussion video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!